Good afternoon. I have some incredible news to share. Later this week, the company that I founded, Savonix, will announce that we have raised more than $1 million in seed capital. Thank you. And this round represents not just dollars in the bank, but thousands of conversations, hundreds of meetings, emails, reworked PowerPoint presentations, and a lot more gray hair on my head than I had when I started. So I am, as you can imagine, both exhausted and exhilarated. And along this journey, I've met many new people, and I've drawn many former acquaintances and colleagues back into my orbit to talk to them about my company and to share my dreams with them. And a few of them have responded by rallying around me and providing their expertise, their counsel, and yes, their money to get my company off the ground. And while I've been supported in many fundamental ways to get Savonix started, I want to talk about the money piece for a minute today because I believe that it's illustrative of a larger issue that we're facing in the sisterhood. So the very first person to write a check, to actually put money in my hand, was a man. And in fact, later this week when we announce our round, when you read about it, you'll see that it is exclusively led by male-dominated venture capital funds and male angel investors. Why? Where are the women? I've spent a lot of time thinking about that because it wasn't that I failed to reach out to them. I made many phone calls and sent several emails to prominent female VCs. And we hear this quote bandied about at women in tech conferences about how there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women, right? Madeleine Albright, and we all nod and we laugh and we say that. But when we talk to female founders and CEOs, like myself, time and again, what we hear is that it was the guys who returned their phone calls. It was the former male founders that mentored them, taught them how to pitch and raise money for their company. It was the male CTO who took time to mentor them and help them further their career. So we talk a good game, but we're not showing up for each other. So what's going on? So I have a couple of theories as a neuroscientist that I've developed as I've watched this happen in my own career, and I'm going to share them with you today. So the first thing I want to talk about, it's not a clinical designation, but I'm going to refer to it as the I'm special syndrome. So it goes something like this. In order to achieve a certain level of success in your career as a woman, you have to learn to navigate, in most cases, male-dominated environments and cultures, right? Including professions. Neuroscience for me, when I first entered the room, only woman in the room. And that's really common. What happens is you end up being the only woman in the room. And as such, you enjoy a certain pride of place. We are rare women who enter these professions who are executives, and our very scarcity makes us special. Enter other women. So, the reason I started by talking about my success today with my company is because I have found that that success has made my relationships with other women more complex than I would wish them to be. Several of the women who supported me when I was a struggling CEO working out of my home office with just my dogs, not a team, and my laptop, became distant, angry, hostile when I found success. And I found myself asking, where is this coming from? Because that's my nature as a neuroscientist, right? Not to blame the person, but to look at the context in which the organism operates and try to understand what is happening here. So, we're all familiar with high school psychology, undergraduate psychology. You guys learned about what happens when a human organism is threatened. When we're threatened, what do? Fight or flight. We run or we fight, right? Fight or flight. So fight or flight's a really interesting thing. It was first described in the 1920s, but now it's understood to be the first stage of a larger thing that's understood as an acute stress response. And this first stage goes something like this. We're threatened, and our brain goes, uh-oh, danger, danger, and it floods our body with catecholamine hormones. These catecholamiine hormones, primarily adrenaline and norepinephrine, prime our body with certain physiological reactions, the first of which is an increased heart rate, followed by increased respiration, followed by a tensing of our muscles. That's the physiological part. But the physiological part is also paralleled by a cognitive narrowing of focus, where the organism, you and me, humans, we're primed to think and react cognitively with two things in mind: combat or escape. And this is the mindset that we're in when we experience threat. It's a natural human biological response. It's nothing to be ashamed of, and it's not anything to feel bad about. And I say that because I'm going to challenge each of you to recognize that you've probably had it in reaction to other women in your work. So this is my theory, is that what happens when another woman enters our department or starts a competitive company to ours in the market is that we experience it as a threat. And because we experience it as a threat, we set off on these implicit reactions that are not even conscious. It's just our body responding in an age-old way. Because let's face it, most of us are not in danger of being eaten by a bear at work, right? No, not me. But our body doesn't understand the difference between that kind of threat and a more modern sort of social threat. So if we're to be honest with ourselves, then we can all say, yes, I've experienced this modern fight or flight in my work environment. When another woman comes in and she's smart and she's educated, and all of a sudden, I'm not the only one in the room. And if that's true, which I will challenge you to take a look at your own self and explore your own biases and your own implicit reactions, then what are we to do about it? Or, as I always say when I face a challenge, what's a girl to do? So the first thing is to not deny it, because when we deny it, and it's an easy thing to want to deny because it's not a very pretty thing to admit, right? Feeling threatened, maybe having feelings of jealousy or envy. If we can acknowledge it, we can open it up, we can explore it, we can parse it out, and we can be the change that we need to see in the sisterhood. It's when we deny these reactions in ourselves, when we're afraid to have the difficult conversations about our own relationships with ourselves as women, our insecurities, the way that we're acculturated to be insecure, acculturated to see other women as a threat even. When we deny that, we allow that fear and that threat to drive our behavior. But when we talk about it, when we put it out in the open, when we make it part of the dialogue we have with one another as women, we can change the whole picture. I started Savonix because I'm a neuroscientist, and I had worked on research that I knew could improve the lives of people who live with things like PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And our tagline is Know Your Mind. And so I want to bring that tagline into the room today and ask each of you to know your mind, to know how you think, to examine your own bias, your own implicit reactions, especially to other women. And I'm not suggesting that you run up to every woman you encounter at every conference and greet her like a long-lost sister. We all have preferences for who we work with and who we mentor. We all have limits on our time and resources. But I do believe that if we can examine these latent and implicit reactions we have to one another, if we can have a more honest dialogue about this part of our human nature, that we can, in fact, create a world, a culture, and relationships both within ourselves and with one another where we are more brave, powerful, and outspoken advocates for one another as women. Thank you.